Thanks for listening to Live Forever Young Radio. Did you know that green is the color of growth and spring? It also relates to harmony by helping provide a sanctuary from modern stresses. On the show today, Bob and Rollie talk about a new practice used by doctors called nature prescriptions that take full advantage of the power of green. Learn why getting outdoors and getting a dose of nature is so important for health and mental well-being. Discover what type of benefits you can enjoy by getting in touch with Mother Nature. So sit back, relax, and get ready to live forever young.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Live Forever Young Radio. I'm Bob. I'm here with Rollie today. How you doing, Rollie?
I'm doing great, Bob.
Great. You know, this is a great topic we have for today. We're going to talk about this phenomena of nature prescriptions, or some people call it park prescriptions, where a doctor will actually write out a script for people to spend time in nature. And we're going to talk about why it's so important and what type of benefit that you can get from participating in this. And at the end, a special segment on how you can create your own prescription without a doctor.
Perfect. It's a perfect timing for spring as everything starts to bloom and we start coming out of our houses from the winter.
Yeah.
Now we can figure out a way to make that work for our health.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah. So, you know, the very first time that we're aware of that this really became a phenomena was back in the 1800s in New York City, where public officials were noticing that as more and more people congregated in Manhattan and it got more and more crowded, people were having more health issues.
Really?
And they just intuitively knew that people needed to be in nature more.
That's
And
funny.
that's why they built Central Park.
Really? They just
Yeah.
kind of said, you know what? We're used to being outside. There's nothing nice in the city. I think everybody's health is suffering because there's no outdoors.
And back then they didn't have air conditioning.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's
on
true,
a given
yeah.
day,
Of course.
it's 30 degrees cooler in Central Park than it is in the concrete parts of the
That
city.
makes sense.
Okay. And so this is the first time really that somebody did that. But nowadays it's even more important because studies show that people spend 90% of their time indoors. This is in the United States.
Wow.
And they spend 6% of their time in their car
Ooh, that's a lot of time in a car.
and only 4% outside.
Oh, man. That's horrible.
And so as a result, people, especially the people that live in cities,
Right.
all right, this isn't going to be true for farmers, but people that live in cities, there's a 20% increase in anxiety disorders, a 40% increase in mood disorders, and people are twice as likely to have schizophrenia.
Sorry, that's not funny, but I'm laughing because when you go to a place like New York where everybody's hustle and bustle, a lot of people are very impatient. They don't have time for things. So
Yeah.
I could see how that could kind of cause anxiety and stress, trying to get here on time, trying to catch your bus on time. You know, like that old song goes, if the train's on time, you can get to work by
on
9.
time. Yeah. Yeah, and it particularly affects children also. Children tend to have more problems with obesity and ADD and depression and anxiety if they are living in the city. And even if people live in the suburbs, but they're inside all the time and they never really leave their house,
Right.
this is what the issues are going to be.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're technically, when we evolved outside.
Yep.
You know, we weren't like here and then a house was with us. It was like we had to evolve and make the house. So we spent years, thousands of years ago, time outside, all our time. And now it's like opposite. So I
Yep.
could see how that could definitely affect health, specifically like what we're talking about is mental health.
Yeah, so somebody might ask, well, how much time do I have to spend outside? And doctors are writing prescriptions now.
Right.
And there's a movement amongst doctors where they're prescribing for people to get outside, and they're writing specific prescriptions. They say the more specific, the better. I'm prescribing that you spend 2 hours a week outside at the park. Okay. Or if they're talking with the person and it's like, well, I like to go fishing. Well, you're going to spend at least 2 hours a week outside fishing.
Wow.
Now, why 2 hours? Because the studies show, and by the way, there's been over 1,000 studies about the benefits of being in nature. And one of them reviewed a whole bunch of other studies, and they concluded that that 2 hours a week is the magic amount of time that really starts to kick in the benefits. Less than 2 hours a week, it still helps a little, but it gets much, much more effective if it's 2 hours.
Okay.
Yeah. And so why would people want to do this? What is it going to help with, right? So
Right.
it's going to help with what we were talking about before, with things like obesity and ADD and depression and anxiety and mood disorders, even the prevention of schizophrenia, right? But in addition to that, they find that there's less suicide, right? Less fatigue,
Okay.
less drug addiction,
Sure.
right? A lower heart rate, which is a very good thing. It means your heart is stronger and more efficient, and your circulation is more efficient. Right? Lower blood pressure, and probably one of the most important things, Raleigh, is that it's going to decrease your stress hormone, your cortisol level.
Yes, we talked about cortisol before.
And we know that when your cortisol is elevated, it causes all kinds of problems. We also know that being in nature elevates your immune system,
Right.
right? And also the veracity of your nervous system. And as a result, your cognition, your brain power. It also tends to give people higher self-esteem, right? And it will create healing faster. So if someone has been sick or injured or had an operation, they're going to heal faster if they spend time in nature.
Really?
And people will have a natural tendency to ask for that. So if someone's been in the hospital and then they go home and their loved one says, "What can I do to help you?" I'd really love to go out on the porch and get some sun, right? You know how that's a common thing?
Absolutely.
And people are like, wow, finally, I'm outside in the sun. Okay? And so this tends to also make people calmer and lowers aggressive types of behaviors.
Sure.
And another thing is, and that the studies found, is that people have an easier time concentrating and paying attention for longer periods of time when they're outside than when they're inside. And if you spend more time outside and you purposefully focus on your attention span, it carries over to the inside. And
That makes
so
sense.
your ability to focus and concentrate tends to be better all around.
Well, I think part of getting outside and it being healthy for you is, you say we spend about 90% of our time inside. Well, so it's not just being inside that we're exposing ourselves to things while we're in there, like constant things like bad news on the news, like video games. If you're a kid,
Right.
you're sitting there and a lot of the times kids play on their phone or on a video game all day long, right? And so that's going to increase anxiety because you're playing a game where you're on the edge of your seat the whole time.
What you're focused on.
Right.
Yep.
And so just not exposing yourself to the things that are in the house and then allowing yourself to get a change of scenery, and then that change of scenery being the nature, the green we talk about, the calming effect of green, that ability to just absorb sunlight. Like you said, sunlight, the vitamin D. That you're not getting if you're spending 90% indoors, watching TV, bad news, video games. It's like a bad recipe for bad health.
Yeah, and outside there's a lot of good input. And the studies show that if you are engaged with nature while you're outside, as opposed to just sitting there playing a video game on the park bench, okay, that doesn't really count.
No.
You need to be engaged with nature where you're noticing things, right? So there's a lot of stimulus in nature that's good for us. The sound of the birds.
I like watching the birds just jump around.
Watching the birds, the aroma of the flowers, okay, and the warmth of the sunlight. People will go outside and wow, it feels really good here in the sun, okay? Well, you're not saying that when you're indoors.
Right. One of the things that we do specifically around springtime to get us outdoors and actually kind of switch our focus up is we do a garden. And we plant the garden and the flowers. Like we usually do some milkweed for butterflies, and then on the other side in a different garden we do vegetables. And so that's engaging with the outdoors. You know, you go outside and you go, oh, I want to check out my plants. Oh, do I have any more butterflies? Do I have any more caterpillars that showed up?
Yeah, and you get to learn things also.
Absolutely.
Learn new things. For example, your milkweed.
Yes.
Right? And you say, well, you have a garden for things to eat, and then the milkweed, you can actually eat milkweed.
There you go.
Right. When it begins to flower, milkweed gets these small bulbs on them that are about the size of a pencil eraser.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you get those, when they get to that size and before they start to sprout, right, you can eat those.
Really?
Yeah. You can pick those, and they're like Brussels sprouts.
Really?
And you can boil them in water, pour the water off to get some of the tannins out, and then boil it a second time, and it's tasty. It's like tiny Brussels sprouts.
I didn't know that. Well, I thought only the caterpillars. The caterpillars climb up and eat them little bulbs all the time. I thought it was only for the caterpillars.
It's great. Another thing, Rollie, that is really important, and this was a study they did where they measured brain waves of people that were prescribed time in nature. They did before and after. And they found that there was changes in certain parts of their brain, and it related to rumination, meaning people that would obsess about things or were awfulizing. Oh, well, that's just like that. That's awful. That's awful. And quite often, mental health problems come about when people get stuck in a loop of identifying things over and over
Default
again.
mode. We call that default mode.
And what happens is it triggers your amygdala, right? And especially if you're ruminating about trauma, right? It's going to trigger your amygdala, which is a seat of deciding if everything is okay,
right,
and processing information. And we know that that there's a very specific biochemical process that occurs in your amygdala that is related to trauma. And if people get out in nature, it tends to reverse that chemical process, and people will stop ruminating and stop awfulizing.
We actually did a show called How to Achieve Inner Balance that talks a lot about the amygdala and the relationship there.
Yeah.
So if you guys want to check that out, it's called How to Achieve Inner Balance at liveforeveryoungradio.com or on our YouTube, Boomers Forever Young YouTube. It's on there.
Yeah.
So check it out. It's actually really helpful to go into more detail about what we're talking.
Absolutely. Now, Rollie, there's this association called the Trust for Public Lands. It's a group of people that have been working for a number of years to try to get more access for people to parks.
Kind of like the guys back in the
nature.
1800s who said Central Park has got to happen.
Right. Well, there are a number of places in the United States where people can't easily get to nature. And so they made a map of the country that they're almost done with that shows every spot where there is no parks within a 10-minute walk. And now the people that run this trust are working with the mayors, etc., to build parks strategically in spots that will allow people to get into nature more easily and more frequently.
That's good.
Yeah. And what they found was where they are building these parks in these strategic spots, the crime rate goes down in that neighborhood.
Well, they got something to do. You know, they got somewhere to go, something to do.
And they have less aggression, more calmness, etc.
They got the ability now. They've been given the power of nature.
Yes, exactly. So a lot of people say, well, you know, this is great where you get a prescription from your doctor, right? But I'm not going to my doctor and asking him for a script.
Right.
So we have a special way to get a script from your doctor.
Yes.
Okay. So the way you do it is you get 2 chairs, put them in your living room, and you sit in one chair and pretend you're the doctor.
Okay.
And you've got a pad here to write a prescription, and you say to yourself, listen, you definitely need to be spending more time in nature. Here's some of the benefits, and I'm going to write you a prescription for this, okay? And I want you to spend a minimum of 2 hours in nature, and it can be at your park, right?
Right.
It can be outside with the kids playing soccer,
Fishing.
at a field, going fishing, whatever it is that you choose. And this prescription is for you.
There you go.
And so now you get up out of the chair,
Right.
you go sit down in your chair,
Right.
and you look back at the doctor and you express gratitude.
Yes.
Dr. Rollie, I am so happy that you cared enough about me to write me this prescription. And I'm so happy you made it specific, because it really feels now like a contract between the two of us.
Right.
And I am going to promise to you that I'm going to do this. And the next time I come back to visit you, what you're going to find is that I spent 2 hours in nature every week or more.
Nice.
I just wanted to say how grateful I am that you would think enough of me to give this prescription.
Awesome.
Okay. So anyway, just a little trick, and it works. It's because what's the issue that might come about? You might start doing it and then backslide.
Right.
But if you have an imaginary contract with your doctor,
Right.
you're way more likely to comply, because your unconscious mind doesn't know that you weren't really at the doctor.
Well, also, there's the idea of, and in our society it's weird, but you don't have to, but people feel like they have to have permission to enjoy things. Mm-hmm. So a prescription is your permission to go outside and enjoy the greenery.
Yeah.
The ability to reduce the stress and anxiety. Like, even for me, if I can't make it, what do I do? Do I have to bring you a doctor's note? No. It's okay to go outside and relax. Yeah. So you need a prescription for permission, and you can give it to yourself with our cool little technique.
Absolutely. Now, Rollie, you and I have talked a lot before about when people get up to take a break from work, to go outside and look at something green.
It's really important, actually.
So if you are going to take a break at work and you have a 15-minute break, and it's not enough time to go to the park, okay, walk somewhere where it's not a park, but focus on what's green,
right.
Okay? And obviously, you want to try to focus on trees and plants and things that are green, and absorb yourself in what you can see that's nature. So your attention is going to draw to you, right, the benefit if you pay attention to the nature part, even if there's non-nature around you. All right? And so if you're in an area where there's very little green because it's wintertime, say you're in, Canada, you're in Ontario, Canada, and it's wintertime, okay? And you're going to go out for a 10-minute walk, put your coat on, go out for a 10-minute walk. You might not be able to see much green, but if you see a green house or a green sign, focus on that. And also focus on the other colors of nature. A lot of times people don't notice colors in nature in the winter because they have this readiness to believe that there's no color and everything's drab. But if you look carefully, there's a lot of plants that are red during the winter time. Right? And you can appreciate that as nature too. Wow, look at that beautiful shrub. I would never have noticed how beautiful the red of it is, because the green's going to dominate it in the springtime. Right. And I got into the habit at one point when I lived in upstate New York and I drove a lot, in finding all the colors of nature in the winter. Cool. How beautiful, shiny gray, the color of an ironwood tree. Right, the immense beauty of the white bark on a birch tree. Birch trees are pretty. And so you can enjoy nature in the wintertime as well if you notice it, pay attention to it, and make that commitment to drawing into you the energy of nature that'll give you all these benefits we've been talking about.
Exactly, man. That's earth science meets health.
There you go. Exactly. And that's the whole idea of nature prescriptions. Make one for yourself. And if you go to the doctor, tell him what you're doing. Yeah. Say, hey, man, you don't know this, but your doppelganger wrote me a prescription to spend more time in nature the other day. I just wanted to let you know.
And it's working.
And it's working great. You might want to try it yourself.
There you go.
And you might want to try prescribing nature for your other patients, just like you did for me.
That's awesome.
Rollie, I think that's it.
That's all I got, man.
Thanks, everyone, for watching and listening to Live Forever Young Radio. We'll see you on the next show.
Thanks for listening to Live Forever Young Radio. Check us out at liveforeveryoungradio.com.